said something there. There's no one way to do it. I think that's really important for people to hear.
When people start to realize that it's not about all the obstacles you've overcome, but and reaching the pinnacle, that it's truly where it's at, but understanding that all the obstacles are the pinnacle.
But at the time, man, no, it was like total left field. I mean, I told people and they're like, what? Like, you play lacrosse? Like, you can do a play?
This is the Energetic Leader, led by a team of 3 who have influenced people at the highest level of corporate, athletic, entrepreneur, and the business world. We teach through science and data-driven methods to help you lead through energy and influence. We don't just use our stories, but the stories of those who have walked the walk, been in your shoes, and ultimately excelled. Whether it's leading a team of 10 or 10,000, building a business of 1 million or 100 million, winning 1 championship or 10, they all have one thing in common: energetic leadership. So with that, step inside and let's help transform you into that energetic leader.
Welcome back to another week of the Coaches Council. And guys, I'm so excited for our guest today. All the time we're talking about ways in which we can overcome obstacles, ways in which doors get slammed in our faces and we look for different windows to get in, or we've got something that we thought we really truly wanted, and then our knees get cut out from under us and we have to figure out how to walk again. And there's nobody that's been better at doing this than the guy who actually wrote the book on it. 10,000 No's, has the podcast 10,000 No's, and it's really all driving towards lessons about perseverance, persistence, and resilience. And not only has he experienced it, but he's talked to hundreds of people who have also gone through this and been able to overcome it to reach amazing levels of success, and understanding that there's not one perfect way to do it, but simply overcoming those no's and finding that one yes. So Matt Del Negro, thank you so much for taking the time to spend time with us here and give people your value and wisdom, taking time off of all the shows you're doing and the network appearances.
I appreciate you having me, Justin. It's very funny how we met and kind of hit it off, and then this came about. And yeah, you said something there. There's no one way to do it. I think that's really important for people to hear. There's, you said I wrote the book on it, which is actually so cool. That's the first time I think anybody's said that, and I've heard it, and I'm like, oh, I did write the book on it. That's cool. But the truth is, yeah, it's really, the book is from being pummeled for so long as an actor. It's a rough business. I've been one of the fortunate ones, and still the beating is just tremendous. I mean, I just got off the phone with my buddy who's got an incredible career, and we've known each other since our early lean days in New York. We were both in the city. We did a theater company together. Neither of us were making any money back then. And, literally just today, having this very conversation about different problems now than we had back then, but in a lot of ways, the very same problems. It's always just challenges. Wherever you go, there will be, you'll peak one mountain and, you'll see this beautiful vista, and then you'll see there's another peak in the distance. And then, so there's always something else out there to overcome. I think, really what we were talking about today, and you and I could get into this, we were talking about it. Maybe it all comes down to presence, being present wherever you happen to be, and not living in the future, not living in the past, but actually just being in the moment, whether that's as an actor in a scene or that's as a human just in life. Like not keep continuing to go, which I've been guilty of, like, oh, when this happens and then this show comes out and they're going to see it and they're going to think this and this movie's going to do really, like, no, don't do that. Like the joy is actually the doing of it. That's the joy. Anything else that comes after it, that's bonus. And if it doesn't come after it, nobody owes you anything, that kind of thing.
You're so right in that. And so often we get caught up in, oh, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy when. And it's always that next thing. It's Kobe Bryant was saying it in one of his speeches, I think it was in his Jersey retirement, when he said, when people start to realize that it's not about all the obstacles you've overcome, but and reaching the pinnacle, it's truly where it's at, but understanding that all the obstacles are the pinnacle. Like that is truly what it's all about, is being able to be in the race, being able to be able to feel those things, to be able to be present and understand that it is a blessing, it is a gift, and it is a privilege to feel that level of difficulty, to feel that level of execute on the resilience, and to have those obstacles to overcome, because otherwise what is the life to really to be lived?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's again, it's easier said than done, but that's the tagline of the podcast is failure is opportunity. And that's just because my dad would always say failure is just opportunity in disguise. And, with that attitude, there are no wrong turns really, as long as you look at them and learn from them. And also realizing that, sometimes the biggest swings and misses are many times the biggest lessons. And it's not just for me. You mentioned that I interviewed a bunch of people. It's also funny you say that we'll say the phrase, I'll be happier when. I had a woman on the show a while ago. Her name was Natalie Kogan. You just made me think of her. She has a company now called Happier Now. And the reason she started it was because she was an immigrant. She came to this country not speaking English, learned how to speak English by watching reruns of Who's the Boss and learning from Alyssa Milano how to speak English. She started companies, did well, sold companies, had, I think, 4 companies, and she was doing really well. And she was an adult, and she said, I've done all of this, and I keep on saying I'll be happier when. And she decided to sell all the companies and start this new one called Happier Now. And the gist of it is just like, I'm happier now because, and it's all about gratitude and presence. And she's one of many guests that really, in their own way, every single person I talk to, if you boil down their message, they're all in different fields. Many of them are in, the entertainment business like myself, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs and pro athletes and cancer survivors. It doesn't matter what their backdrop is. Underneath it, that's kind of the truths that they hit all have to do with gratitude, presence, will, surrender, all of these things that we all go through. And kind of the whole point of the podcast and then the book, which came out of the podcast, was to let people know, if there's a young Matt Del Negro out there, it's like the 22-year-old version of me, they can listen to these people and realize, oh, I'm not alone. Like, yeah, it's rough when you're a 22-year-old actor and you're waiting tables and bartending and taking class and scouring for your own auditions and being told no all the time. It's tough. But if you hear that somebody else who's a little further along has gone through that and still goes through it to some degree in a different way, it'll maybe make you feel less alone and give you a little more wind behind you and wind in your sails and help you keep going. And that's just the whole intent.
Kind of take us through that journey, Matt, as to what that young Matt Del Negro went through from the first time you figured out what that big dream was for you, and the no's that you got told, the journey you went on of both finding your success, but also finding that inner happiness.
Yeah, well, it goes back to college. Between sophomore and junior year of college, I was playing lacrosse at Boston College, and it was Division I back then. It's not right now. Hopefully, it will be again. But It was Division I, so it took a lot of time. It was like, you're an athlete. It was kind of a job. It was you had to study, but you also had fall ball, which was the off season. Then you had the spring. So it was a real commitment, and it was a real source of identity for me. You get there as a freshman, and these upperclassmen are letting you into their parties, and there's a whole thing beyond just the sport. That there are all these benefits, and there's just,
You feel like somebody.
yeah, in some way, it's just like, you're in a pool of 8,000 people. Now you're in a pool of only 30 guys, across 4 years, and so there's an identity thing that happens. And what happened to me was, I wanted to go abroad, to study abroad. I always thought, I had heard some upperclassmen talking about Australia. I was like, that sounds good. Go live on a beach. But everybody would go spring of junior year. And when I realized, oh, well, that's not going to work with the lacrosse season, I decided to go to Italy. I'm 100% Italian. I decided to go to Italy between sophomore and junior year. Was going out with a girl from school. She was in another city there. Long story short, we broke up on the trip. My sister had given me a journal, and I just unloaded into this journal. And in that journal, that first journal, were the first seeds of me seeing, I said, maybe I'm going to be a writer, maybe I'm going to be an actor. But it was coming out from somewhere that I didn't know. It was like, when they say you get the call, I really got the call. I was 19 going on 20, but it wasn't like that immediately shifted everything. I went back to school. I went back to, the old beaten path. I played fall ball. And then the end of the season, we were running around the practice field, and I had the thought of, like, I wish I would roll my ankle. And I thought, this is like bananas. Like, I'm not on scholarship. Why are you doing this? And I went into the coach. I said, hey, I think I'm done. And he said, think about it. I said, I have. I kind of still freaked out that weekend. Like, oh my God, I'm going to have all this time on my hands. What am I going to do? And I wasn't quite to the place where I was like, I'm going to be an actor. I just knew I had grumblings of wanting to do more than just play a sport in college. And I ended up going out for a play that winter. My roommate, who had never acted before, also
Have you ever done it? Had you ever done it before at that point?
No. So all I had done was, like, in high school, we would have like a variety show every year, and they would, so you would have like a class act, and I got picked to be like we did some, like, talk show thing, and I was like the host or whatever it was. It was like that. Literally, that's it. In retrospect, it makes more sense because I played a little piano and sang growing up, but nothing formal. But I always did like to do that. In college, I picked up the guitar. I could play just, chords. I'm a hack, but I could play and sing a little bit. So, and then also there was a guy in my hometown that did this youth group, this guy, Pat Collins, who was an actor. He's still an actor. Great guy. Really looked up to him. In fact, I think I wrote one of my essays for Boston College about him, because he was in the seminary when he was younger, and then he met his wife, and he was like, I'm not going to be a priest. I'm going to, be an actor. But he was just a great guy. Whole family is great. He's got 3 daughters. I just, really looked up to him. So that makes sense now. I go, oh, okay. You had somebody that was a mentor who was an actor. So that makes sense. But at the time, man, no, it was like total left field. I mean, I told people, and they're like, what? Like, you play lacrosse? Like, you can do a play? So I went out for the play, didn't get it. My roommate got a lead, and then a half hour, 30 days later, probably, I think about a month, there was another audition. I went in, and I got the lead of this little one-act play that wasn't even in the real theater. It was like in a lecture hall at BC. But I did it, and I loved it. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I just, that was it. I was an English major. I ended up taking film classes. I got a film studies minor, and I just told everybody that would listen I was going to be an actor. And, still, there was another, year and a half before I graduated. I moved home. I worked laying patios that first summer to just kind of, save up some money so I could move into the city. I did a musical in the next town over, and I kind of started going into the city, taking classes, and it was really, really, really slow start for me. It wasn't like I made money I didn't make money for years as an actor. I was bartending. It's funny. I'm reading the Matthew McConaughey book right now. And
Awesome book, by the way.
Great book, man. I got to tell you, it's really good. I was like, oh my God, this dude, his like first four auditions were like major motion pictures, and like one of them, he was the lead of Time to Kill. He was like 23 when he shot it, 24 when it came out. I'm like, oh my God, we had a different trajectory. Mine was like by hook or by crook. I was in classes, I was working in the craft, like kind of like I had a couple of little breaks, but the big break I had in New York was Sopranos. And that wasn't until I was, that was December 20th of 2001 is the day I found out I got that. I moved to the city January 1st of 1995, just to give you an idea of the time frame. So
you're talking about 6 years of just hustling and grinding to figure out what your yes was, what your opportunity was.
Yeah, and there were yeses along the way. There was a movie I did in Boston that was like started out non-union, turned to union. I was the lead of it. It went to some film festivals. That was a big yes. It didn't pay me anything. There was a commercial, and then maybe like a couple of commercials that actually made me a little money, but that was after several years of doing it. So there were always enough yeses to keep me in the game. And that was, my senior year at BC. Over Christmas, I went back home, and, you have like a month off during college for break. So I worked for my buddy's dad was an architect and builder. So I worked on a construction site of his, but it was over the winter, and I had done it over the summers. It was more, hustle bustle. Over the winter, it was like basically going to this construction site, and my recollection, could be wrong, maybe the framers were there for part of the day, but in my mind, I was there by myself and like putting debris into this big dumpster. And I just remember this so specifically, and I'm like, am I really going to be an actor? Like, I did one play my junior year. It wasn't even on a stage. Am I really going to do this? Like, is this real? Am I full of shit? And I talked to my cousin who was a teacher by trade, but he's also a musician. And I told him this, and he goes, look, how old are you? And I was like 21, 22, whatever I was at the time. He goes, do it for 3 years. If you get nowhere, you can always go get a real job. And I was just like, that makes sense to me. And I figured if I put my everything into it for 3 years, there's no way I'm not going to get somewhere. And when the 3 years were up, it wasn't like I had Sopranos or anything like that, but there was progress. There was enough. And more than that, there was just like, I was like, this is what I do. This is it. It's not necessarily logical when I think about it. At the time, it's like, there's so many other things you could do that would be easier, but you just like, nope, this is what I do.
It's like anything that gives you a great reward at the end. It never is logical. Saying growing up that you're going to be a professional hockey player, growing up saying that Elon Musk saying that I'm going to put somebody on Mars, Jeff Bezos saying that I'm going to be able to get anything to you within 12 hours. I mean, nothing is logical that has a true vision and purpose behind it. But the people that end up succeeding are the people that have clarity, the people that are committed, the people that are willing to put the work in, willing to take the hits, the blows, the punches, the sacrifice to get there. What sacrifice, what struggles did you have along the way to that kind of took us through that middle ground that ultimately then yielded the success that you're now reaping the benefits and rewards of?
So many sacrifices that it's almost hard to even. It's like, how long do you have? There's so many. There's just the uncertainty. There's the it's kind of like most other, entrepreneurs know what I'm talking about, that because really an actor is an entrepreneur. The thing that's maybe a little bit different is there are emotions involved. Part of my work is also getting vulnerable, whereas as an entrepreneur, your work is not getting vulnerable. Your work is, preparing this product of some sort, selling it, getting in the market. As an actor, have to do that as well, but you also have to expose yourself, and then so because your product is also you, there is a personal aspect to it that's maybe rougher when you get told no, because you feel like, oh, are they saying I'm not good enough? I think as the years have gone by, just doing it over and over again, having a better understanding, being more mature, I realize now, like, it's not so personal. There are so many other factors that go into it. So when I'm told no now, it's like, okay, yeah, they needed somebody different, whatever it might be. It's not like they're not negating me as a human. But that uncertainty is a huge sacrifice, because planning your life, like, there were always, my wife and I laugh, like, we would say, like, we should just plan vacations that we really want to go on, and I'll book work. Because it was like every time we had a trip set, I would, like, magically at the last minute book a job, and, like, we'd have to, like, adjust it, or I'd have to leave. There are times when we were on ski trips and I'm getting picked up and getting taken to Vancouver, and it was like there's so many stories like that. And then there's also just the sacrifice in the beginning of, like, everybody I went to college with who took a more conventional route. I was literally serving them drinks. I was bartending in Manhattan, and a lot of guys I know that were working on Wall Street, mid to late 90s was a really great time for them. And, you're in there. I was a pretty good student, and I'm in there like, am I delusional? I mean, I remember thinking that sometimes. I'm like, I'm 28 years old and nothing's really happened. I mean, I've had these little yeses along the way, but, like, nobody even, when someone asks what I do, I have to give a whole monologue explaining, where I bartend and do this, and I'm in classes, and I'm an actor, but it's like, you can't even just say I'm an actor. You had to, like, explain it. And I'm like, dude, you're 28. These guys are, like, they have real jobs. They're making real money. There's just an ego. There's a bit of a hit to the ego. That's one thing. And then there's just the, I don't know. There are so many things, but I think ultimately why I chose to do it anyway is because when I was doing the actual thing itself, whether that was in class or that was on a job, I loved it. I loved the grappling with the psychology of the characters I'm playing, or I love the fact that it's psychological, but it's physical, it's philosophical, it's all encompassing. And I think because of that, I'm able to put aside the tough parts of the journey. But really, sacrifices. Yeah. I mean, I lived in a 5-floor walk up for 7 years, and like a rent stabilized place that was like, it was not glorious. It was not glamorous, put it that way.
And I totally get that. There's a couple things that you said about not taking things personally, and you go think back to that book, The 4 Agreements, where being impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, always do your best, and then don't take anything personally. And it's this freeing ability to know that, hey, that no is not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of your character. It's not a reflection of your ability. It's just a reflection of the fit there. And it's not a no forever. It's a no right now. And so where can you take that to learn how you can be better for that next opportunity that is actually going to present itself? And that's, like you said, I love how you compared it to acting to entrepreneurship, because it is like entrepreneurship.
Well, I got to tell you, that's one of the things that was so great about the podcast for me was, um, I think actors tend to think, and myself included, like, oh God, this is so hard. Nobody understands. They don't get it. Now, when I started the podcast, people said you should just talk to actors, just talk to people in your industry. That's smarter as a business. It's more niche. That's your audience. And I was like, I love actors. I love people in my business. However, I love other people too. I want to talk, I want to widen the net. And they were right, business wise. It wasn't as smart because it wasn't as specific. But I wanted two things. One, I wanted to make the concept the king, the 10,000 no's, the overcoming. I didn't want it to be like, stunt casting and getting a big star. And I've had some pretty big stars on the show, but it's like, it's not about that. It's about the concept. And in the process of doing that, I happened to sit down with so many entrepreneurs, and it was great because I realized, my friends and I are bitching about not going in for an audition and not getting it. But what about the entrepreneur that I talked to who spent, 2 years on a product or a year on or whatever they did, a whole launch, they had like warehouses of their stuff and that went bust. And they have all these employees like, whew, I don't get a job and I just didn't get that job. But then another audition could come in the next day and I could get it. So talking to entrepreneurs and just other folks in other industries was one of the best things for my soul and my psyche, because I realized, everybody deals with it. And in some ways, it's easier to let go of the nose as an actor in some ways, because once you're done, you did put time in to prepare. That's the thing. Like when an audition comes in, everything else goes to the side and it's like just total focus. And most of them you don't get statistically. Not bashing myself. I'm just saying statistically, most things you go in for, you don't get.
Unless you're Glenn Morshower and you put salami in your pants and book 8 out of 8.
Yeah, for the most, I would say for the majority of people, that's not the case. So you're doing it, but you think about it, or even for writers, like within my industry, I did a show a couple years ago, and it was such a good show. It got crazy response from the comedy world, and then it was on Netflix, and then it didn't get a second season, and we found out. Like within a month of it releasing, it went from hype to just went away. I still haven't found out what. I feel like there was something beyond just it not getting picked up. But I think about those writer directors, they were a team. They had another show on Fox that was really, really great, and kind of has a cult following, also got dropped. And I thought, man, these guys, like for me, it was heartbreaking because I loved the character. It got a lot of attention and it went away. But then I was able to, I booked the job that I'm on right now, which, has gone for a while. Those guys, they had to create that whole show. They wrote, they had to sell the concept, write the 8 episodes, get the production done, cut the show, release the show, all of it. And that goes away and you're back to square one. So even those guys, it's like you look around, and that's one of the points of 10,000 No's is instead of having a pity party, look around and realize everybody's in it. Nobody gets out unscathed. I really don't care who they are. They could seem like they have the perfect life. I guarantee you, if you go through it, there's They had something. They just did. That's the human experience. We all get it.
You're exactly right. And there's a saying that comparison is the stealer of joy. And both of our mentors, Sharon Shabbatza, him and I were actually speaking about this the other day, is that everybody else makes it look like they've got it all together. And as looking into somebody else's grass, it's like, oh, damn, that grass looks nice. Like, I wish I could get it to look like that. But if you spent time in your own grass, in your own backyard, in your own area, and started to look at, hey, you know what? My edges do look pretty good. And I can just kind of tighten up this a little bit. There's 500 other people looking at your grass going, damn, I wish I had his grass. Or I wish I had her grass. Because inside the house, you don't know what that house looks like. And
Right.
in actuality, nobody has it together. And everybody's in it. Everybody's getting it. Everybody's dealing with the ups and downs. Everybody's dealing with a no in their own version of what that no looks like. And I think that is so, so powerful. I've got a question in terms of how you were able to help facilitate yourself and what strategies you use even today when something doesn't necessarily go that way, because you seem to have such a calmness about you. You seem to have this unbelievable faith that things will work out because I am where I'm supposed to be.
I love that you're saying that because it doesn't always feel that way. But I love that description. If I could just get you thinking that. That's no, you know what? You're right. And actually more recently, I would say that applies to me. That's more accurate. I don't want to pretend that I don't have anxiety about not working. I don't have anxiety. I do. I think one of the things I've learned is, what historically, if I look back since I've been doing this, since that, 1995 or early 90s, whatever, there have been times when I was really, really on the ledge, questioning, what am I doing? Should I be doing this? Am I delusional? All of it. And excuse me, it seems like every time I would really get to a point where it was like, oh man, this is almost dangerous. Something would just drop from the sky in my lap. And, I'd like to think like, oh, I work hard, I grind, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, I do. I care. I work hard, all of it. But so do a lot of people. I feel like there's something beyond me that has, has helped, has stepped in, whatever. I feel that has given me the belief, the faith, the courage to, when I get into those sticky situations again, which I have, to go, hey man, just, it's going to be what it's going to be. What are you going to do about it? Do your work, control what you can control, which means be as prepared as possible. And then know that, like, for better and for worse, you're going to get the gig or you're not going to get the gig. I was actually just talking about this the other day. One of it's almost like my career. If I look at since 2017, when I started the podcast, I feel like I'm in a new section of my career. There was a job that started right then, Goliath. It was a Billy Bob Thornton show on Amazon. And I remember the thing that started the podcast was, I was working on Scandal, and I was told that coming up season, it was like 2016, I was told, like, you're going to be in a lot of this next season. The storyline changed and it just dried up, and I wasn't under contract. So I went from thinking I was going to have a big chunk of work to having nothing. And in that time, I had moved, my expenses went up, and I was going in for pilot season. Politically in the world, it wasn't great for my, demographic. That particular pilot season. So I felt like I was doing really good work in the rooms, but nobody cared. I mean, it was like, there was no feedback. It wasn't no's. It was like a vacuum. I mean, it was like going in and auditioning and feeling really good. And like, it's almost like they didn't even know you were there. Really disheartening. And that was when I decided to start the podcast, because I was like, I just need to create something. But I bring this period up because it was in that period I kept saying to my wife, like, I feel too good in the room not to have something good happen. Yet nothing was happening. And then I got the audition for Goliath, and it wasn't even great material. I went in, I knew the casting director. I felt relaxed. I felt like I did a good job with it, but it wasn't even like a particularly incredible role. It was, you couldn't really tell from the audition. I get the role. We start shooting. I start the podcast. Then the show goes down for like, shot like 2 episodes, and then the show goes down. And I'm not, at the time, I'm not even hearing this. I'm like, what's happening with Goliath? I haven't heard from them. 2 months later, the show comes back. They got network notes. They needed to rewrite things. And when they came back, my role was much better. Did I have anything to do with that? No. I got lucky. I got lucky that I had a job, that this happened, and all these things. Like, I didn't really have anything to do that. Was I also working on myself, doing the podcast, not feeling sorry for myself? Yes. I was in a good head, all of that. I think it would be narcissistic to think that my head in doing the podcast is what changed that for me. I got lucky, but I also had a good head about me. So I was able to capitalize on it, and it turned out to be great. But that story, I think, makes me go, you can't control it, man. Like, you can control what I could control, that I'm proud of, was that I did the podcast instead of twiddling and like getting in my head and getting tightened up and restricted and constricted, really. That I'm proud of. The actual gig that turned into a really cool job, that was the universe. That was God. That was some dumped that in my lap and was like, this is what you get right now, And so the lesson to me is like, work hard, but almost take your hands off the wheel a little bit, and don't try to, you can't control it. When you hit an ice patch on the road, like, dude, doesn't matter if the tires can't touch the road and you're on ice, like, you're going wherever you're going. So you can sweat all you want and, grit your teeth and grit your hands, but that's not going to do anything for you. So sometimes you got to like let up. Sometimes you got to, there's a bit of a surrender, which is not really a word that you hear so much with entrepreneurs, or that you hear so much on Instagram or whatever. It's all about like, rise and grind and all that kind of stuff. And like, I believe in, you read my book, there's a ton of stuff from my sports background about like discipline and training and keeping them chopping and all that stuff. But there's also something about surrender and just, I don't know, maybe being okay with where you are and trusting that things are going to, they're going to find you if you're doing the right things. My hope, my faith, and what I've seen happen is when you're doing the right things long enough, when no one's watching, eventually someone sees it. It's usually on a way, way, way longer timetable than I always wanted, but eventually people clock it and they're like, oh, that person's been working hard. That person cares. You start to look back at their work and you're like, oh, they've been around for a while. Oh man, they did this, and this. Oh, and then like you get something and it seems like it's out of nowhere, but it's not. It's like you're getting paid back for what you did 20 years ago.
I love that you bring up that point, because again, it's something that I've kind of lived my life by. It's, you highly underestimate what you can get done in a year, but highly overestimate what you can get done in a month. And when you put the time in, when you put and are focused again on where your feet are, You're focused on doing good work. You're focused on that self-development. You're focused on the present moment and what you need to do in order to control the controllables. All of a sudden, when opportunity comes about, you no longer need to get ready. You're already ready. You just be. You just do. And then that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's been the coolest thing about this whole, since the book has come out and with the podcast and all that stuff. Like, this meeting today, and your listeners don't know this, but we got on. I came in with the hat, and I said I look like a scumbag. I just got back from surfing. Like, I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? The beauty of this right now is that because I've lived, and trust me, dude, I have, a laundry list of things that I wish would go better, had gone better, all of that, right? But one thing that's very cool for me at this stage that I'm very happy about is a conversation like this. We know each other very little from, meeting on an app, right? And Clubhouse.
Wasn't a
And
dating app.
and yeah, not a dating app. I had to say that, Clubhouse. Um, and and we, all I have to do is show up. Like, I didn't know what you're going to ask me. There's something that for me personally, that I absolutely love about this stage in the game for me is that I don't, I kind of knew the gist because I got the gist of like what you're up to. But we just talk, and I don't have to prepare anything for you. I just have to be honest. I just have to be, again, what I was saying back in the beginning, present. Am I really listening to your questions? Am I taking them in? Are they going to be perfect answers? No. Could I listen to this a year from now or even a week from now and go, oh God, what were you thinking, man? That was like terrible, terrible answer. Yeah, sure. But in the moment right now, I'm just kind of, I'm listening to you, I'm taking it in and I'm going, okay, this is what I think. And anybody listening can take me or leave me. It's like they hopefully they hear something that, that they identify with, or they think, oh, that applies to me. I have noticed when the more specific you are about your own particular situation, the more universal it is, ironically. So even though there could be a lot of people listening to your show that are not actors, hopefully they'll hear something that I said and feel like it applies to their life, even if they're in, it doesn't matter what their industry is. In my opinion, it's the industry is merely the backdrop. It that's just that's just the setting. These principles we're talking about are, I think, what everybody kind of goes through.
You're exactly right. And that's, I think, where I love this platform. And that's why I love the podcast and the guests we bring on, because we've brought on entrepreneurs, we've brought on athletes, we've brought on actors, we've brought on uh, people who've been to the Olympics, we've brought on people who have overcome extreme defeats in their life. And it all comes back to one level of, we're all human. We all experience feelings. We all have emotion. We all make decisions, and we all end up creating some type of result for yourself. And getting to the point of which you're at is a beautiful, beautiful thing, because it's this level of serenity, this level of freedom. And I love the word you used of surrender, because there is a bigger plan out there for each and every one of us. So there is a guided purpose for each and every one of us. And when we can just have the patience and understand, hey, control the controllables, lean into your gift, lean into your passion, lean into what it is that you truly want to do, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, with everybody that you've ever interviewed, everybody that's been on your podcast, everybody that you've put into your book, what is, if you were to summarize it, what is the key takeaway that you can give to our audience from all those people? And then what is the one key takeaway you can give from Matt Del Negro to our audience?
It's kind of, the takeaway would, I think, would be about reframing. Everybody that I spoke to had and really not even just people I spoke to, any movie you watch, any television show you watch, it's like there's a moment when that protagonist is hit with something that is their all is lost moment. It just, they get their knees taken out. And I one of my actually good friend who was a guest on the show, Matt Long, wrote a book called The Long Run, New York City Firefighter. He's like the epitome of it, but every one of them had this. He got run over by a bus riding his bike through New York City to work at the fire academy. And it was during a transit strike. I won't go through all the details, but it was like the strike should not have been happening. The guy driving the bus should not have been in the city, ran over him, literally seat post through his anus, out his abdomen, stuck to the bottom of the bus, had to be sawed from it, given a 1% chance to live, comes back and runs the New York City Marathon 3 years later, the Lake Placid Ironman a year after that. He has a story about, he was almost, I wouldn't say suicidal, but he was really, really, really in the dumps. And there's just a moment where he reframed it all, and it became the purpose of his life. And to the point where he's like, I would not, if I could go back, I would not give up the bus running me over. Like it's responsible for everything I have in my life right now. And I think that's like kind of the main takeaway that everybody has, from Matt Long to Henry Winkler, who was, he couldn't, he was dyslexic, and he was a big hang up, but he turned it into his strength. All of these people, they've reframed what came to them. So I think that's it, like whatever it may be. And there are way more harrowing stories than my story. But even those harrowing stories, that's what they did. They reframed it. I did it in my way, but it wasn't like life or death stakes. And then for me, I don't know what my takeaway would be. I think it's what I'm kind of working on right now with myself, which is just, we've talked about it, and I appreciate you saying that it appears that I am this way already, but I think I'm working on it, which is just being okay with where I am and who I am, the good, the bad, all the areas where I'm not what I, at one point hoped I would be, imagined to be. It's great to strive. I will always strive. That's just kind of in my DNA. But the work right now feels like it's not actually about striving to get over there. It's more about being cool with where I am right here so that you want to come here to me. It's like pulling it to me. And hopefully that applies to your listeners as well. Whatever it is that, everybody seems to have this, at least a lot of people I talk to, this feeling that like everyone over there, it's kind of what you said about looking at someone else's yard, or looking at their grass and going, oh, their grass is greener. Everybody, myself included, it's like, look over there. What is that person doing? What are they doing? And instead of just like, look, how great is this? I mean, how great is this right now? You and I don't really know each other. We're sitting here having what I think to be a pretty cool conversation. The sun is shining. Could be worse. You know what I mean? It's like, it's pretty great. And just kind of actually just acknowledging that and just being like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Is this a monumental day that you're going to see this scene in a movie of two dudes sitting on mics, like talking to each other on Zoom? Probably not. It's not like a cinematic moment, but it's a pretty cool thing to be doing with our day, in my opinion.
I agree with you. And I think that we'll kind of bring it all back in for the listeners. So, and something that kind of brings us back to what you just spoke about is Matt was surfing on the water under the sun where and I didn't know that he surfed. I knew that he was out in a sunny place.
Barely.
But this afternoon, we're 3 hours time difference apart. This afternoon, I was wakeboarding on water that at some point came from the same water source in which he was surfing on. We were both on boards, and we were both under the exact same sunshine in different points of the world. And we're both present in our being, but yet in a completely different space, doing the exact same things. And so I think that kind of like wraps that together in a very unique way, where it makes you really think like, wow, like how small is this massive world that we live in?
Yeah. And that's a beautifully said. And also one of the silver linings of all of the terrible stuff we've gone through as a country and the world with COVID, one of the silver linings is like this, Zooming does not seem to be, Zooming is now a verb, it's like, you're in Florida, never met you. And here we are having a pretty in-depth conversation from across the country. Yeah, it is a small world. And, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can add to that. I love how you put that. How
I love
old?
it.
You seem very wise for your age. You look young.
I'm 32.
32. You're a wise 32, man.
An old soul. My
Yeah.
mother called me that as an 8-year-old. I'll stick to it.
He was right. Yeah. Yeah. No, this is a pleasure. I love, I've got to listen to your podcast because I love the questions you're asking, and you really are asking them. I don't feel like you're going through a list. You're actually, bouncing off, and this is nice. This has been great. I hope your listeners dig it.
No, I appreciate that, Matt. And there are no lists. I love to just keep it very organic and really go where we're meant to go at this given time, and impact those that need it and need to hear it. So where can people find your podcast? Where can people find your book and get access to yourself?
Okay, so 10,000nos.com is just 10000nos.com. You could find a link for the book there. It has the podcast there. Obviously, you could find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that stuff. City on a Hill, the show that I'm doing right now with Kevin Bacon and Aldous Hodge, is on Showtime. Season 2 is coming out March 28th. It'll be on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Kind of an early 90s Boston cop drama. And actually, I got Bacon coming on my podcast Tuesday. I'm going to be interviewing him, so I'm psyched about that. And
such a cool guy.
Yeah, he's great. He's really great. And then Instagram is probably where I'm most active, and that is just at Matty Del, MattyDel. And that's
fantastic.
That'll pretty much, MatthewDelNegro.com, but whatever. If you go to one of those places, basically, if you go to 10,000nos.com, you can figure it all out.
You'll find him.
Yeah.
And then we've got a really active and action-taking audience. What is one thing that our audience can do for you?
For me, I would say buy the book. I'm really proud of the book. I think it will. There's no pressure. If they liked, if you're listening right now and you're like, this guy isn't a total idiot, you kind of like what I said in the last hour, I think you'll like the book. It covers a lot of ground. It was fun to write. It was, I feel like it's honest, and it's just my take on things. And it's gotten great feedback. That would be a huge help. I'd love that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. So guys, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, whether you're in the mountains of Colorado, the deserts of Arizona, or the great white north cold of Canada, we're all in this together. Everybody's grass is worth the same. Everybody's grass needs to be watered, needs to be nurtured, and have the faith and understanding that you've been provided the gifts that you need to overcome your 10,000 no's, whatever they are, to ultimately find your big yes. So stay hungry, stay humble, and we'll see you next week.